The anime community has always been quick to downplay the story of Bleach and claim that everything comes out of nowhere, that Tite Kubo just sits there and throws random things at the paper to write his story, when in my personal opinion the tale of Bleach is one filled with some of the best foreshadowing in anime. Kubo does an excellent job being discreet about and bringing up past conversations in extremely subtle ways. For starters, I would like to disclaim that I don't think Kubo had the entire story of Bleach planned out from the start. No one does. Oda doesn't, Kishimoto doesn't, a lot of these mangakas don't know if they'll make it to chapter 60, let alone over 600. Kubo didn't even have the first 30 volumes planned out, which Oda thought he was halfway done at Alabasta, so while the authors do throw some hints on twists throughout their story, a lot of the time they haven't fully decided whether they'll go down that route. Despite this all though, Kubo does an excellent job foreshadowing events in his story. After all, in today's video we're going to be exploring the foreshadowing of the long, legendary tale known as Bleach. But before we get into that, I'm currently pushing for 3,000 subscribers by the end of June, so any help would be absolutely insanely appreciated. Also, if you end up enjoying the video, don't forget to drop a like. 200 likes for a second part dissecting even more moments of foreshadowing throughout the story of Bleach. And also, if you're feeling a little extra cheeky, drop a comment. And without all further ado, let's get into today's video. The first thing, and probably one of the most obvious yet subtle ways Kubo has foreshadowed in his story, is the identity of White. In some parts, Kubo acted far too subtle with it, however in other moments it's thrown into your face. For example, when White yells at Ichigo saying that he is Zangetsu, and while that foreshadows White's true identity as Zangetsu in Thousand Year Blood War, no one believed White until the chapter known as The Blade Is Me. There's a moment prior to that is far more subtle as well. When Ichigo first meets White, it's through Old Man Zangetsu, aka Yuabak, from 1,000 years ago. And as White is introduced to Ichigo, he appears excited and ready to fight Ichigo. However, upon a closer look, everything is truly revealed. Quickly take a look at the panel where he's smiling. Take a look at the Zanpakuto and look at White's reflection of his smile. White is sad. He doesn't want to fight Ichigo. He wants Ichigo to truly know who he is. However, everything is out of his own control. It is through these subtle methods that Kubo has been able to explore so many elements of the story of Bleach, that from a single reflection, he is able to reveal a character's true intention. Another moment of foreshadowing that comes directly from White specifically is how White threatens to take Ichigo over if he becomes too weak again. This leads into the Vasto Lorde form that Ichigo takes against Ukiura. This becomes more obvious as time continues. His mask slowly begins to change, and we even see a similar form to Vasto Lorde when Ichigo loses control while he's trying to tame his hollow side. White was going to take control and help Ichigo win his battle no matter what. After all, he literally said he was going to take control. This is one of Bleach's best moments of foreshadowing inside of the entire series, yet people still like to undermine this as a Deus Ex Machina when that makes absolutely no sense. Foreshadowing in Bleach has always been extremely subtle. You can take so many scenes throughout the story, like Isshin being a Shinigami, when Isshin talks about Grand Fisher, or even when Kisuke compares Ichigo to Uryu. Isshin had constant chances to call Kon Ichigo. In fact, Isshin constantly said the name Ichigo, to the very fact that it was strange that whenever Kon was in Ichigo's body, we never saw Isshin say the name of Ichigo. On top of that, Ichigo having Shinigami powers of his own proved that someone in his bloodline had to be a Shinigami. Later on, as Isshin being a Shinigami is revealed, Isshin actually foreshadows Yuabak as the true killer of Masaki, as he drops the line, "I never hated him." Some have translated this to also be either "I was never bitter" or "I never blamed him." Why did Isshin not dislike Grand Fisher? Well, it's simple, because Grand Fisher was never responsible for Masaki's death, but Yuabak was. Grand Fisher was just a hollow, and as we know from Isshin, hollows do as hollows do. He was not responsible for the death of Masaki. This one definitely is based on which translation you trust, but knowing Kubo at other parts of the story, I think it is more than a fair statement to make the connection personally. Another piece of foreshadowing in the same moment is just a page prior, and this has to do with Kisuke and Isshin's conversation. It implies that Kisuke had something to do with Isshin losing his Shinigami powers. This isn't touched up again until Ichigo's origin story in the final arc of the series though, but it definitely proves that there was a connection a long time ago between the two characters, and that Kisuke had to do something to Isshin that ripped his Shinigami powers away from him for a time being. So, Bleach doesn't have any foreshadowing, you say? Well, did you know Shinji can be seen in the first chapter's title page? This foreshadows him 20 volumes early. Did you know Yachiru touched Kenpachi's Zanpakuto when Kenpachi asked where she was from? Every time Kenpachi's Zanpakuto was brought up, attention was specifically given to Yachiru as well, especially as she notes that his fight against Ichigo was unfair as it was 2 against 1, and how she stood right next to him as he asked his sword for its name. These 3 things foreshadow that Yachiru was the manifestation of Kenpachi's Zanpakuto, but the moment that does it the most is definitely when Kenpachi literally asks her where she's from, and she points at his Zanpakuto. Unohana had a dark side. Several times she would give people this feeling of uneasiness, and in fact, Aizen avoided a battle with her. Now this is not me saying Aizen would lose, but he did understand and respect her strength, and realized it would have gone in the way of his timed plan. On top of her being the second oldest Shinigami in the Gotai 13, she even made Ichigo Kurosaki listen to her. All these things point towards her true identity being the Kenpachi. Kenpachi's Raki's strange, inconsistent, and constantly changing power levels throughout the story all foreshadow how he's subconsciously holding his power back. Shinji writing his name backwards and walking backwards towards Ichigo foreshadow his Shikai and Bankai abilities that are revealed far later inside of the manga, and his Bankai far later inside of the light novels. Renji's Bankai not having much of an ape influence foreshadow that it was only half of his true Bankai. This next one actually influences several distinct various foreshadowments throughout the story. For starters, Byakuya bringing up Ichigo looks foreshadows Kai and Shiba, but once Isshin being the Shinigami is introduced to the story, Ichigo looking like Kai and Shiba foreshadows Isshin's secret identity. Heck, Ukitake originally thought that they were related until Byakuya dismissed it. Another piece of foreshadowing is in chapter 485 when Yuabak kills looters, he asks him if he is a prophet and can see the future. This points and obviously foreshadows the power of the Almighty being revolved around the future, and the tone is said it can point to him being able to control it. Gremmy turning into a monster foreshadows Kenpachi's Bankai turning him into an Oni/monster, a power that not even the Kenpachi can fully handle. Another piece of foreshadowing is, did you know Aizen knew about Ukitake's contract with the Mimihagi? He says, and I quote, "No one stands in the heaven, not me, not you, not even the gods." He is referencing Mimihagi in this, and this is tons of chapters before we know Ukitake's backstory. It is foreshadowing Ukitake's entire backstory. Yuabak, or Old Man Zangetsu, using shadows foreshadows his true identity. He uses shadows to pull Ichigo into his inner world in chapter 110, while we see the shadows used to invade Soul Society in chapter 511. Old Man Zangetsu is then revealed to be Yuach around chapter 540. Many people believe Ichigo's Quincy powers are an aspect that was never foreshadowed in the story of Bleach. However, they would be quite wrong. Firstly, Kubo very early on developed the concept of Ichigo being a Quincy. You could make a reverse claim using the shadow statement above, but I won't be doing that because there's plenty of other statements. The first statement is when Ryu is introduced into the story of Bleach, Kisuke explains Quincy's as being like Ichigo. While to the audience in Rukia this meant something different, to Kisuke, someone who does know Ichigo's true identity and Ichigo's mother, it obviously is referring to him being a Quincy. Old Man Zangetsu uses an ability to stop Ichigo from bleeding. This technique is something we later get to know as Blood Vein. Ichigo's bedsheets are a Quincy cross. Aizen tells Ichigo that he is the offspring of a Shinigami, and then he is cut off by Isshin Kurosaki. While this was also translated as human later on, whether you believe in the first translation or the second is irrelevant. Isshin in the origin story became half human. So Aizen is basically saying you're the offspring of a human, Isshin, and a Quincy, Misaki. It goes even further as we learn that it's potential that the second translation is actually a mistranslation. One of the translations I've seen on the internet of the scene ended with the last chapter being with a Shinigami end, while the start of the following chapter started with a human end. This is how Tite Kubo wrote the 2 chapters, as if the first one was what Aizen said, but the second one is perhaps what Ichigo forced himself to hear. It's very complicated, and while I genuinely believe any way you decide to shape the translation, or believe is the official canon statement, you can still make an argument towards it being foreshadowing. Another moment that foreshadows Ichigo's true identity is the fact that Ichigo managed to take all of Rukia's powers rather than just half. Quincy's had an insane ability to absorb Ryatsu. It's never properly explained why Ichigo could take Rukia's powers. I mean, Rukia had some hypotheses here and there, but they all just never stood up as they made no sense as Shinigami just did not have that ability. Quincy's, however, do. The fact that he is a Quincy is a clear and decisive answer here. Some other things that really lead him to being a Quincy is foreshadowing from early on points that point to Old Man Zangetsu being a Quincy and White being the real Zangetsu. Times like when the Old Man Zangetsu used shadows, Bloodvein, and even times when White pointed towards Ichigo and claimed that he was never using the true power of Zangetsu. Finally, the last piece of true evidence was gathered by none other than a Reddit user by the name of Sword of the Moon, and that would be that Ichigo is based around an ancient Shinto belief called the Metama. In Japanese culture, the Metama is from the terms mi, meaning honorable, and tama, meaning spirit. The concept is based around the spirit of the dead, and in total there are 4 types of souls that inhabit the normal being, Ichigo being the center of this by representing the concept of Metama. The story of Bleach is all about Ichigo finding his identity and creating a balance between these 4 souls. These souls are all known as Aramitama, Nigimitama, Sakimitama, and Kushimitama. Sakimitama is the happy and loving part of one's soul and is theorized to represent the Shinigami. Nigimitama is the harmonious soul, which is theorized to be the human soul. The Aramitama is the rude and violent soul and represents the hollows, and finally Kushimitama represents wisdom and represents the Quincy. I plan to dive deeper into how Shinto beliefs really drive Ichigo as a character throughout the story of Bleach, but that's going to be a later date as a whole. The final thing I would like to dissect is the foreshadowing for the Fullbringer Arc, as many individuals claim the characters in this arc come out of nowhere, and I genuinely feel like this arc is as foreshadowed as most of the story inside of Bleach. Yes, I know I said otherwise in a past video, but I greatly disagree with that video and that statement I made. To get started, Genjo being the substitute Shinigami and him existing are critical for the story of Bleach, as the Soul Society had rules regulating the substitute Shinigami and an entire program for them, meaning that there had to be a substitute Shinigami prior to the event. As for the substitute Shinigami badge, the simple fact that it failed and did not work properly to prove Ichigo's identity was proof enough that something fishy was going on. As for the Fulbringer Powers, Kisuke literally gives a one-for-one explanation on the concept of Fullbringer prior to the Fullbringer arc. Chad and Ohime is this: did we as viewers really believe that there was no other humans out of the 7 billion people on planet Earth that had similar powers to Chad and Ohime? Also, I'm just going to mention this, on top of the foreshadowing in Fullbringer arc, there's also some foreshadowing for that Hell arc, you know, that juicy nice arc, as Hell Butterflies only followed powerful Shinigami and no one else, and they had the name Hell Butterfly. Honestly, Kubo was a genius with that one, because like as we look in the story, we don't see Hell Butterflies following the weaker Shinigami, but only the more powerful, like Lieutenant Plus tier Shinigami. Overall, there's far more moments that really foreshadow everything in the story of Bleach. I mean, from Ichibe's ink being on Yuwatch's name, to the fact that Ryukin and Isshin had a history, and how Isshin being called Kurosaki was a massive deal to Isshin. There are a ton of moments throughout the legendary story of Bleach that are insanely well done, and I'm open to covering more of them in the future that will encapsulate the story of Bleach and reveal more of the secrets of Tite Kubo. Anyway guys, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a like and comment. This was honestly a blast to conduct, script, record, and finally upload. And it is all made thanks to your guys' undying support. Anyway, as usual, in the words of Genichimaru, bye bye!